Roughly 2 years ago, Mazda introduced the latest member of their SUV family, the all-new CX-50. Now, this model was a little strange because a lot of consumers expected this vehicle to replace the bread and butter CX-5. However, to everyone's surprise, Mazda actually ended up keeping both vehicles around, selling this vehicle alongside its slightly smaller and less rugged-looking sibling. Now, when the CX-50 first came out, the company was promising an electrified powertrain option, and for 2025, that hybrid powertrain has finally arrived in the form of this. This is the 2025 CX-50 hybrid in the top-of-the-line Premium Plus trim level. It essentially has a powertrain that slots between the base 2.5-liter engine and the 2.5-liter turbo, offering up to 219 horsepower and getting up to 38 mpg. So as you can see, this week, we finally got a hold of the hybrid model to drive for a few days, and the big question I answered, with the addition of this new hybrid powertrain, has Mazda managed to craft the perfect family SUV that offers a great combination of power and efficiency? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the slight exterior styling tweaks between the hybrid and the non-hybrid version of the CX-50, I thought I'd pop the hood and remind you guys, what makes this vehicle so special, because that is obviously the main story here. Now, as you can see, the hood is held up by struts as opposed to a prop rod, and what you're gonna find here is an engine that's been borrowed from Toyota. It's essentially the same powertrain that you're gonna find in the current generation RAV4. Now, as you can see underneath this hood, even the actual motor itself, the engine cover, is essentially the same engine cover that you find under the hood of the current generation Toyota RAV4 hybrid. It just essentially has a Mazda cover over it. This engine cover literally pops off, and you can see literally the same 2.5-liter block that you find under the hood of so many other Toyota products, because this engine is basically that fourth generation hybrid system. So it essentially combines a 2.5-liter gasoline direct and port injection 4-cylinder engine. That is a Toyota engine hooked up with 3 electric motors. There's 2 electric motors at the front, and then there's a separate electric motor at the rear, giving this vehicle an electronic all-wheel drive system. It all goes out through an electronic CVT transmission. It's a planetary system, and it draws its power from a 1.6 kilowatt-hour nickel metal hydride battery pack, which is actually a little bit different versus the lithium-ion battery pack that Toyota just recently put in the latest RAV4 hybrid. So technically, it's the older battery pack. The power output is essentially unchanged from the current RAV4, offering up to 219 horsepower. 176 horsepower comes from the gas engine, and around 163 pound-feet of torque comes from just the gas engine alone. The electric motor offers around 118 horsepower and 202 pound-feet of torque just on its own. Just like Toyota, Mazda doesn't quote an actual torque figure combined with the gas and the electric output. It's going to be a lot, though, because it's an electric motor. It offers instantaneous torque right off the line. The company also doesn't quote a 0 to 60 time. The quickest time that I've gotten in a CX-50 turbo was around 6.7 seconds. I suspect this model will be slightly slower. We'll try it out when we get it out on the road. Fuel economy is obviously the big reason why Toyota or Mazda went to Toyota to borrow this powertrain. This vehicle is rated at 39 in the city and 37 on the highway. That's a whopping 13 mpg better versus the turbo version of this powertrain, and 10 mpg better versus the 2.5-liter gas-only option, which was the most fuel-efficient option in the CX-50 until the hybrid came around. It has a slightly smaller 14.5-gallon fuel tank. With that 38 mpg combined, this vehicle should do around 500 miles of range on a full tank on regular gas. That's roughly 100 more miles of range versus the gas-only 2.5 base engine. So again, significant increases in fuel efficiency. This vehicle should have a top speed of around 125 miles an hour. Towing capacity is the weakest of the CX-50 engine lineup, offering just up to 1,500 pounds, which is expected, a little bit less versus the RAV4 hybrid, which can do 1,750 pounds. And as this model sits, it weighs in at just over 4,000 pounds. It's a solid 100-ish pounds heavier versus a CX-50 gas engine only version, and roughly 200 pounds heavier versus a comparably equipped Toyota RAV4 hybrid. But let's go ahead and close up this hood here and talk about the slight exterior styling tweaks. Now, as you can see, this model is the top-of-the-line Premium Plus. Mazda offers it in essentially the Premium Plus, and I'm sorry, the base is the preferred trim, and really exterior styling-wise, it looks pretty much identical to a gas-only version, but there are a couple of noticeable tweaks. In fact, Mazda says they had to significantly upgrade the lower chassis of this vehicle to accommodate the Toyota powertrain and to accommodate the rear electric motor. They also had to redesign the rear subframe and do suspension tweaks throughout to kind of, again, adjust for the weight. You can see the front fascia has the standard full LED headlights. On all CX-50s, you have that signature Mazda 5-point grille with this interesting chain link fence design for that gloss black area. You can see that grille is actually functional, allowing air to pass through along with this lower portion over here. The vehicle itself, Mazda says, has been raised by about 2 inches, and that's because they had to raise the floor and the chassis up the vehicle to accommodate the battery pack by 2 inches, but because of the additional raise of the vehicle, they also kind of adjusted the cladding. So as you can see, the front fascia has a little bit more aggressive cladding that kind of goes up to the front into the middle part of the bumper a little bit more. You have this LED turn signal down here, along with an LED daytime running light. Those vents right here, as you can see, are technically fake, but the headlights are still the same, Solving adaptive. You don't have any fog lights on this vehicle, no LED fog lights. There's this interesting texture here for that gloss black metallic in the grille, and this color is called polymetal gray. It's kind of like a cool gray color. It's technically an extra charge. It's definitely, Mazda's signature color along with their Soul Red Crystal, but along the lines, you may not be able to tell this is a hybrid until you start moving around the side profile, because the CX-50 hybrid is the longest member of the family at 186.1 inches long. It's around 0.3 inches longer thanks to the unique front and rear bumpers. Its wheelbase remains the same at 110.8. It's around 65.8 inches tall, the same width as the gas-only version. Again, it's slightly taller, but ground clearance on this model with the 19-inch wheels is actually only 8.1, 7.6 if you guys go for the smaller 17-inch wheels, and that's because, again, of the fact that the floor is lower, even though they raised the vehicle up to accommodate the battery pack. You can see the cladding along the wheel arch trim and along the rocker panels is also a little bit more overgrown. It's designed, again, to accommodate the increased height. These are the 19-inch 5-spoke wheels that you get with the Premium Plus trim. It's riding on a 225 by 55 R19 tire. You have a smaller 17-inch wheel on the lower trims. You have 12.8-inch four-wheel disc brakes throughout, independent front suspension, along with a semi-independent twist beam at the back. So even though they had to completely redesign the rear subframe, Mazda did not put a fully independent suspension in this vehicle, no adaptive dampers. You don't typically find that in this segment. There is a very subtle, kind of generic-looking hybrid badge here off on the fender, which is also on the other side. You'll also find it on the rear. You can see the mirrors, they are power folding with this beautiful gloss black look to it. You also have integrated turn signals. No 360 camera, however. Mazda doesn't offer their full panoramic 360 camera on this vehicle, but you do get at least the panoramic sunroof. That's on the premium trims and up, which also opens up to vent air. I like the aluminum low profile roof rails, along with the slight aluminum trim along the side. Mostly it's just gloss black or flat black. And then moving around from the rear of the vehicle, you can see the CX-50 to me is still one of their more handsome looking SUVs. I think this looks better versus the CX-5, so it's no surprise to me that sales of this vehicle have started to really pick up. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this overtake the CX-5 in the coming years, especially with the new hybrid model. Moving around to the rear, you can see the look is also pretty much the same. You have full LED taillights with this interesting turn signal, which isn't sequential, but it has a very nice looking fade in and fade out appearance to it. For the LED, you'll have an LED brake light as well. Some fake vents here along the side, which I don't love. There's a CX-50 all-wheel drive badge there. All-wheel drive, by the way, is going to be standard equipment on all hybrids. And then again, that very subtle but also generic looking hybrid badge at the back. You still thankfully get a dual chrome outlet exhaust tip, although the mufflers are a little bit on the small side. The rear muffler tips on the RAV4 hybrid, I think, are a little bit larger. The rear spoiler here could be a little bit more pronounced. You do have a rear window wiper, but no digital camera rearview mirror. Mazda doesn't offer that on this model. And then looking at the cargo, it offers their hands-free power liftgate as well. And when you open up the cargo space, Mazda was able to mostly preserve the same cargo capacity, and that's because of the adjustments that they made to the rear subframe and to the chassis. You have just under 30 cubic feet of total storage space with that back seat up. It's a reduction of about 2 cubic feet, so it's not too bad. You can see there's a little bit of storage over here and off to the side. You also still have a nice little somewhat underfloor storage area, and Mazda also wanted to preserve the temporary spare tire, which is a good thing, but it did eat into the cargo space a little bit to do that. If you want to fold down these seats, you can basically do that by pulling that lever from back here. You can see the floor is not completely flat. The 1.6 kilowatt hour battery pack actually lives underneath that rear seat back there, which is why the floor is a little bit raised. Mazda says you have around 56 cubic feet of total storage space with all the seats folded, which is good, but just keep in mind you're going to get roughly, I want to say, 15 more cubic feet of space from the RAV4 and the CR-V hybrid, so kind of keep that in mind if you want maximum rear seat cargo area. So on the outside, there are very subtle changes to let you know that this is the hybrid variant. And when you get inside the interior of the CX-50 hybrid, you're also going to notice it's very similar to the gas-only variant. However, before we get inside, let me show you guys the key fob. This is Mazda's latest intelligent access key that's standard on every hybrid version. You can see the buttons are along the side. You have your usual buttons here for lock, unlock, remote open for the power liftgate, and a panic function. No remote start from the fob itself, although if you have access to the Mazda Connect app, I believe as an owner, you should be able to remote start this vehicle as well. As you can see, approaching the door handle, it's a traditional pull style door handle. This vehicle does offer an auto walk-away lock function, whereas if I basically have the key fob on me, you hear that little beep as I walk away, it'll lock the door for you automatically. To unlock, you basically just touch the back of the door handle. That's what unlocks the door for you, and it'll also fold in the mirrors. Now, one of the unique color options on the hybrid is this red premium leather interior. You cannot get this red technically on the gas-only variant. However, in the gas variant, you can get this beautiful terracotta interior. I suspect Mazda will probably expand the availability of this red at some point. This leather is a genuine leather, and the seats themselves, they certainly look great. They're heated and ventilated. The ventilated seats are included with the Plus package. Heated seats are going to be standard on all versions of the hybrid, along with leatherette seating. So kind of keep that in mind. Mazda makes the hybrid kind of a higher trim level equipped vehicle. Now moving to the door panels, you can see there's a soft touch injection molded plastic. There's beautiful leather with contrast red stitching here, silver painted or gray painted plastic here, nice padded area over here along with this chrome accented door handle. Window controls, they feel high quality and tactile. They are one touch for all four. You still get power folding mirrors, which is nice. And you also get 2-person memory seats. These seats also adjust in 10 different ways. Same thing, I believe, with the passenger side as well. So it makes a great first impression. And then when I step inside, it has a nice, easy step-in height, thanks to that just over 8 inches of ground clearance. Now, as I shut the door has a pretty solid sounding thunk. And remember, this is built on the same platform that also underpins the new Mazda 3. It's technically not the same architecture as the CX-5, which has an independent rear suspension. Starting the vehicle up, you can see start-stop button here is the same, although now it just says power because when you turn the vehicle on, there's no more starter noise. It just says ready in the instrument panel. It does have the traditional Mazda chime, but the vehicle just essentially whirs to life because remember, it's a full hybrid system, so it can power the vehicle on electric power alone at low speeds. There's also even an EV mode here. If you guys have enough charge in the battery, it'll allow you to drive the vehicle in pure electric mode for short distances at light throttle applications. Now you can see the steering wheel is actually a little bit of a large steering wheel. I think the diameter is too big. I also think that Mazda should have gone with like contrast red stitching on the steering wheel or a flat bottom design. No paddles on the wheel, as you can see, although it's a CVT, so I'm not really too upset about no manual control. The steering wheel itself offers manual tilt and telescoping, which offers a good amount of adjustability and range. The horn, it sounds pretty nondescript and appropriately sized given the dimensions of this vehicle. And then you can see the instrument panel. This is not Mazda's fully digital cluster like you find in the CX-70 or CX-90. Instead, you have a 7-inch digital display in the center along with 2 analog displays to the left and to the right. That display is slightly customizable. If I push the info button, you can see you can get rid of the traditional speedo, have a digital one. You can also put a traditional one here and then put your fuel economy information there. There's not much in terms of adjustability, and this vehicle also doesn't really offer much in terms of a hybrid indicator. So you can see right there, there's your little battery gauge that shows you how much charge the battery actually has. But if you want to see whether the engine or the battery or electric motor is driving the wheels, there's no indication of that like what Toyota gives you. So that's a little bit of a miss for Mazda. That should have been like a quick software update they could have done. They could have pulled it easily from the CX-70 hybrid and the CX-90 plug-in hybrid. You can see there's a heads-up display, which is included on this trim. You can hear the engine just fired up. It does that from time to time to recharge the 1.6 kilowatt hour nickel metal hydride battery pack. Most of the times, however, you can basically sit and idle in this vehicle with no engine, wasting fuel. In terms of materials, this upper portion has a soft touch injection molded plastic, which is nice. All hybrid models come with their 10.25-inch Mazda Connect head unit. You can see the native software is not a touchscreen, which is frustrating. You do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and when you connect to the wireless CarPlay, it basically allows you to use it as a touchscreen. I'm not going to be able to do that now because I'm using my phone to film, but Mazda recently added wireless CarPlay and Android Auto and the touchscreen functionality only in CarPlay when the vehicle is even moving. So it only works in CarPlay. The native system could really use work. It does have embedded factory GPS, which the software behind it is fine. It's just kind of looking a little dated. But for the most part, the speed is quick. I don't love how the infotainment system works when you're trying to go through your radio presets. Of course, it had to start blasting music there. Sorry about that, guys. If you want to adjust your radio presets and favorites, again, you kind of rotate this little wheel here, and you can see it's a little bit slow to respond there at times. And then if you want to access your favorites, you basically can either skip from here, or you can also kind of skip from here and kind of push that along. You can see it takes a second for it to populate there. Mazda's native software, I think, just needs a redo. Hopefully the company is working on something that's much better. When I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see there's your backup camera. There's no trajectory and no 360 camera, which I think is a big miss for this vehicle. At this Premium Plus trim, Mazda should have offered it, although they do offer it on the turbo models, just not on the hybrid. So I think that's a silly omission. Same thing with no heated steering wheel. So you can see you do have heated and cooled seats, but there's a button here where the heated wheel would have been. But instead you just have the ventilated seats, which at least is nice how it's here, because if you're looking at a CR-V hybrid, Honda doesn't even offer ventilated seats, but Honda does offer a heated steering wheel on the top trim, so kind of keep that in mind. That screen is larger versus in the CR-V, but it's about the same size in the RAV4, because that has also a 10.3-inch display. The backup camera, as you guys saw, I forgot to mention, doesn't even have trajectory, and the quality and resolution is just really rudimentary. So that's kind of a miss for Mazda, along with the lack of parking sensors. You can see here's some more gray painted plastic here. You have real leather with the red contrast, which looks very nice. The build quality in here is basically what you expect from a Mazda. You have some storage down here along with your cup holders. I don't love the piano black here. It's going to show scratches and fingerprints and dust very nicely. And you can see your drive mode selector is here. It's been updated to see there's a trail mode, there's a normal mode, and then there's a power mode. So no more sport and no more off-road. The power mode essentially ups up the electric motor output to give you more power instantaneously. The trail will tailor back the stability control and traction control and kind of force more power to come out of the rear axle. So it's been changed for software. Mazda's latest driver assistance tech is also included on this vehicle, although it's missing a couple of features that you'll get in the CX-70 and 90. You can see there's some empty buttons over here. This center console area you can see is a nice padded area where you'd rest your elbows. If I push that, you can see it's a relatively decent size. There's two USB-C charging ports in there. You have a wireless phone charging pad here, which I believe is actually included on all hybrid versions, which is kind of nice how that's standard. These seats, as you can see, that beautiful red looks good with the polymetal gray. The heat and ventilation function works well. Then you can see this seat, as you can see, is technically a 6-way power, and you don't have lumbar. So there's no adjustable lumbar on the passenger seat like there is on the driver, but at least it's a 6-way as opposed to a 4-way power like you find on some competitors. I also find the cushioning to not be super soft. The bolstering does hold you in place nicely, but these real leather seats would be more comfortable if Mazda just made the padding a little bit softer, which I think is a silly miss. The 12-speaker Bose stereo also sounds good. If you guys are an audiophile, you'll appreciate the upgraded sound system, and you can see opening up the glove box, it goes into the dash. It's damped but not lined with felt. It offers 2 different levels of storage, which is nice. You have an auto-dimming rearview mirror, but no digital camera rearview mirror. You have LED map lighting in here. The ambient lighting in here also isn't great. I'm surprised Mazda didn't want to go with a little bit more, considering their view as a premium brand. I love the fact that if you go for a premium trim and up, you also get a panoramic sunroof that opens up and to give you an actual tilt function, or opens up to vent air, although the opening could be larger. You can't even get a panoramic sunroof on the Honda CR-V hybrid, so kind of keep that in mind, but you can on a RAV4 hybrid. So again, there's some features in this car that Mazda, threw in, which is nice, but they also are just missing the mark shortly by not offering a 360 camera and a heated steering wheel. But overall, the interior is certainly a nice place to spend time with good visibility and good build quality. It just needs a better native software, and they also need to move the screen a little bit closer so I can actually reach it as a touchscreen. But let's go ahead and hop into the backseat area and show you guys what that space is like. Now, the CX-50 does have a pretty class competitive backseat. I love the fact that this door opens up fairly largely to allow you to put a car seat back here. If you guys have kids, you need to put that kind of stuff back here. Material quality is hard touch plastic, so it's not quite as nice as the front seat area. It's been downgraded. Down here, you can see it is still leather padded. Window controls, 1 touch up down for all 4, so that's really nice. Nice storage compartment here in the door. The battery pack for this hybrid system actually lives underneath this rear seat, so it's pretty small at 1.6 kilowatt hours. It does raise the seat up a little bit, but thankfully Mazda preserved the versatility where I can fold this seat down, although it's not quite a completely flat floor. It is still very useful. This seat also doesn't recline, so kind of keep that in mind. You can get that in something like the new CR-V hybrid, for example. And then once you're back here, you can see this is pretty much where I have the seat to drive, and then legroom space back here is around 37.5. That's basically the same as a RAV4 hybrid. So even though this vehicle is larger than a RAV, the interior space isn't great in terms of packaging. You do have rear seat air vents. You have 2 USB-C charging ports. No heated rear seats back here, however. You have 1 storage cubby, and you can see if I fold this down, there's an armrest with 2 cup holders. Typically, Mazda would put another storage area here with heated rear seats on the top trims, but it's not available here, as you can see. And then in terms of the headroom space, this panoramic sunroof does eat into the headroom space. I only have maybe like 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches of additional clearance because of this roof taking up space. But overall, the backseat area is certainly on par with the last RAV4 hybrid, but keep in mind the CR-V is going to offer even more backseat space if you guys require that. So here we are back behind the wheel of a Mazda CX-50. It's been about 2 years since Mazda loaned me one to test for a full week. And this model is certainly interesting because it's the first ever full hybrid from Mazda where, we're driving a CX-50 hybrid, but it's also rare in the instance that this is a vehicle that is showcasing a manufacturer essentially swapping technology, because what Mazda has done here is they've essentially borrowed a powertrain from Toyota. So it's a Mazda with the heart of a Toyota, but not just any heart. This is essentially the best hybrid drivetrain that you're going to find in the segment. It's the RAV4's 2.5 liter gasoline direct injection 4-cylinder hooked up with 3 electric motors through a planetary eCVT. The power outputs are essentially the same, 219 horsepower combined. That allows it to snug right between the base 2.5 and the 2.5T. This has roughly 37 less horsepower. We don't know the torque figure because Mazda and Toyota does not disclose what the combined torque figure is, but this essentially allows this car to get around 10 to 13 mpg better versus the gas-only variants of the CX-50. And the last time I 0 to 60 tested a CX-50 with the turbo, I got 6.7 seconds. Let's go ahead and see what we can get here in the hybrid model, even though it's down on power. We're in the power mode here. We'll basically brake torque it. Sounds just like a RAV4, which is kind of funny. Feels quick though. 7.34 seconds there, which is pretty good, although I will say that the last turbo CX-50 I drove did it in 6.7, and the last RAV4 hybrid that I tested did it in 6.8 seconds. So I'm not entirely sure where the discrepancy is coming from. This car is around 200 pounds heavier, so that's the only, logical explanation I can give you for it being a little bit slower. Regardless, 7.3 seconds is perfectly great. I mean, this powertrain is so smooth, so refined, so fuel efficient also. I'll talk about the fuel economy later on, but anytime you just put your foot down, the eCVT just automatically will push you right into the meat of the power band, and it allows you to basically feel that effortless rush of power, which is good for, getting out of the hole quite nicely. Let's try another run here without brake torquing it. It just feels so smooth. The handoff transition between electric and gas is so seamless. The engine is a little noisy, but we're gonna get 8.31 seconds there. So 8.3, obviously, that's a second slower. That's with it more going slightly uphill without brake torquing it. Brake torquing it will allow you to get the best acceleration time out of this powertrain. But most of the times you're just going to be driving this vehicle around, and anytime you put your foot down, it just gives you that instant rush. So you get that pull of the electric motor, which is instant, and then once the electric motor powertrain, or the electric motor power tapers off, the gas engine takes over. Remember, this is purely a Toyota powertrain. It's not a Mazda engine. It's a Toyota eCVT as well, and it's just a wonderful combination. I also want to notice that the engine, while it is a little bit noisy, it's not quite as noisy as the last RAV4 hybrid that I tested. I'm noticing that Mazda perhaps uses a little more sound deadening materials, but anytime I just put my foot down, it just automatically will push the revs up and just give me that surge of power. And this vehicle also preserves the trademark sporty handling characteristics of the CX-50. Remember, this is it's an independent front, semi-independent twist beam at the rear. So technically it's a less sophisticated suspension than the RAV. The ride quality in this vehicle is definitely firmer. It's a little bit bumpier. The seats aren't quite as plush. I actually definitely prefer the Toyota RAV4 hybrid seats instead. Toyota just uses a more plusher material. Even though Mazda uses a real leather, they need to use better padding. The seats are nicely bolstered though. This holds you in place nicely. The steering in this vehicle is quick, direct, responsive. This is definitely a sportier driving RAV4. I mean, in fact, if you drive this vehicle back to back with a RAV4 Hybrid XSE, you're going to notice the Mazda is noticeably more fun to drive. It just feels more buttoned down. Put your foot down here. The vehicle primarily feels more front drive bias. The electric motor at the rear axle, remember, only provides around 54 horsepower. So it's going to feel primarily more front wheel drive biased. And that's kind of the characteristics of the Toyota hybrid system. But, you won't notice that in your day-to-day driving. This is, again, a really well thought out vehicle. It's got a wonderful, hybrid powertrain that just is super refined, super smooth, very elegant in the way that it, does the electric to gas handoff, which is nice. Let's try another run here without brake torquing it. We'll just floor it. Still in power mode. This surface is pretty level as well. 7.6 seconds there. So brake torquing it shaves about 0.3 seconds off the 0 to 60 time. So 7.3 is perfectly respectable, but just keep in mind it is around a half a second slower versus the last RAV4 hybrid that I tested. So credit that discrepancy to the extra 200 pounds that the CX-50 is carrying around. This is a bigger vehicle, keep that in mind. Now, when you're just driving the vehicle normally, I'll switch it into its normal mode here. It's very simplified in the drive modes. There's normal, power, and then trail, which is supposed to be their off-road setting, although it's mostly just adjusting the software. This vehicle just rides and drives really competently. The ride quality, like I said earlier, is still smooth, but it is a little bit firmer. It's a little bit smoother than the last CX-50 I tested with the 20-inch wheels. These 19s certainly help soak up the bumps a little bit better. I can feel the fact that the rear end is not a fully independent suspension. Sometimes when you'll hit a bump, you'll feel it kind of transfer the motion side to side. It rocks a little bit more, so it's not quite as refined. I was kind of hoping with Mazda updating the rear subframe on this vehicle, they would have put an independent rear suspension, but sadly they did not. Visibility out of the CX-50 hybrid is also pretty good as well. Yeah, I have a good view out of the front, the side, the rear. I don't have the availability of a digital camera rearview mirror. This car also comes with Mazda's advanced driver assistance tech, although it doesn't have their road, their road keep or full lane keep assist that you can get in the CX-70 or the CX-90, but the adaptive cruise works well. It's not quite as good, however, as Toyota's latest Safety Sense 3.0, which technically isn't even in the RAV4. They use 2.5. But overall, I'm pretty pleased. This is a really, just like the regular CX-50, it's easy to drive, it's easy to see out of. It gives you that sportier driving dynamics, and I don't really notice too much of a difference here in the handling characteristics versus the last gas-powered CX-50. So it really shows you how much Mazda is excellent at tuning their chassis. I mean, they basically programmed this vehicle to handle just as well, or tuned it to handle just as well. They even improved the weight balance, the weight distribution, because of the battery pack that lives underneath the rear seat. So this has a 55 to 45 weight distribution. It's a little bit less nose heavy, which probably translates it to feeling a little bit more agile, to be honest. If I drove the two vehicles, powertrains back to back, I probably might notice this is more agile. Obviously, the turbo is going to be a little bit quicker, but it's also going to be significantly more thirsty, because I remember the last turbo that I tested was getting in the low 20 mpg range mark for fuel efficiency. This car, in my week's worth of testing, I've been averaging around 35 mpg. 35 is a solid 12 mpg better versus the last CX-50 turbo. So that is a huge, significant jump. Now, I will say that it's around 2 mpg less than the last RAV4 hybrid that I tested. In fact, that was like when it was getting 37. You can easily get over 40 in a RAV4. On the highway, this car was doing around 37 mpg, so around 2 mpg better. In the city, I'm sure if I had a little bit more stop and go traffic where the electric motor can drive the vehicle a little bit more on its own, I'll probably get even better gas mileage. But still, this vehicle gets significantly better gas mileage. So it effectively addresses the main criticism I have with the regular gas powertrain CX-50s. With that 14.5 gallon fuel tank, you're looking at around 500 miles of range, although I was only averaging around 430 miles of range. So I imagine that's going to improve. This vehicle only has 800 miles on it. So I imagine that would improve as you continue to drive this vehicle, and as you continue to put more miles on it, the fuel economy will improve, but still such a big improvement. So Mazda obviously went to the right partner. I mean, Toyota does have some ownership stake in Mazda. They obviously borrowed the correct powertrain, because this is basically as fuel efficient as the CR-V hybrid, but it is a little bit slower. The CR-V did it in 7 seconds, 0 to 60, but it's still pretty quick. It has the sportiest handling dynamics of any hybrid SUV that I've tested, which is fantastic. This is pretty much on par, if not a little bit better than the last CR-V. So really, if you guys have been waiting for a Mazda CX-50 hybrid, I have to say this one's probably definitely worth the wait, and the fact that it just has a Toyota heart makes this vehicle even more appealing, because it's going to have that solid reputation for reliability, just like Toyota, because Mazda's is also reliable, but they can be a little bit spotty at times. But this is, again, the perfect marriage. So bravo, Mazda, for finally offering a hybrid powertrain in the CX-50. Now, when Mazda first introduced the all-new CX-50, me as a journalist and as an enthusiast, I really questioned if this model would eventually replace the CX-5, because as you guys know, the CX-5 is their most important model. It essentially accounts for over half of all of Mazda's sales here in the US. The company consistently does around 150,000 CX-5s. Now, in comparison, the CX-50 in all of 2023, they did around 45,000 units total. However, this year, as of basically Q3, at the end of Q3, the company has managed to move nearly 60,000 CX-50s. So they are on track to roughly do probably around 75 to almost 80,000 CX-50s here in the US. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this model eventually overtake the CX-5, because sales of the CX-5 are down roughly 10 to 15% so far this year compared to last year. And with the addition of this new hybrid powertrain, which isn't available on the CX-5, I'm going to assume that this is going to make the CX-50 even more enticing, because as you guys saw, the fact that they are borrowing essentially the best hybrid powertrain from Toyota makes this vehicle even more appealing. 0 to 60, as you guys saw, happened in around 7.3 seconds, which is not as fast as a RAV4 hybrid, but it should be plenty fast for most people. I was easily able to do around 35 mpg in my mixed around town driving. The powertrain refinement is also among the best. It has just this best seamless transition between gas and electric, and vice versa. So I think Mazda did a great job with tuning the actual powertrain to kind of deliver that sporty acceleration that you're looking for. Even though the sound isn't what you expect from a Mazda, it definitely has the pull that you expect, along with the sporty handling. The ride quality is still on the firmer side, so if you guys prefer a softer ride, go ahead and buy a Toyota RAV4 hybrid, which will be getting a little bit better gas mileage. It'll be a little bit softer, but again, less engaging to drive. This essentially has the same engaging feel that you're going to get from a CR-V, while essentially getting the same fuel efficiency while not being quite as quick. There's just also some things about the Mazda. If you like the styling of the Mazda, you like the infotainment system, you like the handling dynamics that Mazda gives you along with their premium interior, this is certainly going to be, an enticing option out there. The backseat area is also not the biggest, but it's also relatively roomy. I'm still not quite in love with Mazda's native software with their infotainment system, but at least they finally added wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, and it actually works as a touchscreen when this vehicle is actually in motion, although the screen needs to be moved a little bit closer for my taste. Really, the CX-50 to me was always one of my more favorite options, but with the addition of the hybrid, it just gets even better, especially with that hybrid powertrain from Toyota. And the other great thing is Mazda has kind of priced the hybrid to be kind of in between the base engine and the turbo. The base CX-50 non-hybrid will start at around $30,000. If you guys want the hybrid in the base preferred package, it's going to cost you at least $33,970. It's about $3,600 extra to go for the hybrid powertrain, which I actually think is a great deal. Surprisingly, if you're comparing it to the RAV4 hybrid, the Mazda is around $2,000 more expensive on paper, but to compare the RAV4 hybrid properly, you have to look at an XLE premium trim, because that's what's essentially similar in equipment to the Mazda base hybrid powertrain versus the Toyota hybrid, whereas the Toyota can offer you a decontented LE version, which Mazda technically doesn't go that low. If you guys want to go up to the premium, it'll cost you at least 37 grand. This premium plus trim level, which essentially offers most of the equipment you want, minus the fact that you can't get it with parking sensors, a 360 camera, and heated steering wheel, checks in at just over $40,000 with the polymetal gray exterior color and the destination charge. My particular test vehicle here checks in at around $41,920. So just under 42 grand. Certainly is expensive, but at the same time, it's actually around 3 grand or 2 grand less expensive than the Turbo Premium Plus version, which has, a little bit more power and those features that I talked about, which are missing on this trim. So kind of keep that in mind. A RAV4 hybrid can also be in the $40,000 to $45,000 range. A CR-V hybrid is essentially the same price. And the CR-V hybrid is essentially also lacking a 360 camera, but the Honda does offer a heated steering wheel, but you can't get the Honda with ventilated seats. So there's a lot of features about the Mazda that kind of puts it in between a RAV4 hybrid and a CR-V hybrid. And the fact that, Mazda is offering another hybrid that gets excellent fuel efficiency, it gets great acceleration, it has great exterior styling, it gets sporty handling, just makes this vehicle even more appealing. So I'd say if you guys are looking at a Mazda CX-5 or CX-50, make sure you put the hybrid model at the very top of your list, and really just try to decide between if you guys want to go for this, the Toyota RAV4 or the Honda CR-V. Those are essentially my 3 favorite hybrids that you're going to find in the compact SUV segment. Well, all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new, first ever 2025 Mazda CX-50 hybrid. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.